Thank you.
All right, we're going.
Good evening and welcome to the Boston Women's Film Festival. We are here tonight to watch For the Love of Rutland, an amazing film. And we are honored this evening to have the Women in Film and Video New England with us to speak to the director and the protagonist and lead actor and subject of this remarkable film. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Ingrid Stobbe. Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Thank you everybody so much for coming and for joining us. Super, super excited to be able to join you on behalf of Women in Film and Video. My name is Ingrid Stobbe and I love this film, so we're going to start talking about it. We're here just to give you a bit of an orientation of who's joining me right now. We have Jennifer Maytorena Taylor, who is the director of the film. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Super excited to have you. We also have Stacie Griffin, who is our main subject. Amazing primary protagonist in the film. I love the way you said that, Joanne. And Sarah Lima is joining us, as our backup key contender here, who is working for the Boston Women's Film Festival. So as I was watching the film, what I thought I would do is I jotted down some questions that I was thinking not only viewers might want to talk to both of you about, but also as watching it, as I think many of us are that are tuning into this particular festival as a maker. So definitely some questions for that subject as well. But obviously, Stacie and Jennifer, whatever feels applicable to you, I know you know each other very, very well at this point. So please feel free to just jump in and we'll have a nice conversation. The first question I think is very, I think most people want to know this, is please talk to us about your relationship with one another. How did you meet? I think especially with documentaries, we always wonder, how did we find this story? And sometimes it finds us. I think a lot of us would love to know, how did you find each other? How did you end up in this particular relationship together?
You want me to start, Stace?
Sure.
Okay. Well, let's see. I lived in Rutland for a fair amount of my childhood after my family and I moved there from Los Angeles back in the 70s. So I actually wanted to make a film in Rutland for a very long time. And when I learned about the refugee resettlement in early 2016, it seemed like a good catalyst to tell what I hoped would become a very complex story about the town. So I began doing some research filming and, sort of hanging out and looking for ways to really tie all of these disparate pieces of the story together. And I ended up spending a fair amount of time in the neighborhood that Stacie lives in the park that features very prominently in the film. And I was conducting a kind of just like a research interview outside what turned out to be Stacie's house with my funny little digital Bolex camera. And I think that's when you came over, right, Stace? And it was kind of like a rainy day and you were cleaning off the playground equipment.
It is, yeah. So Baxter Street Park here in Rutland had just recently been built and opened. And I, went over taking care of the playground, so that the kids had a safe, clean place to play in when they got out of school. And Jen was there with a mutual friend of ours having a conversation, and we talked for hours and made a film, and the rest is history. And here we are today.
Just like that. Yeah.
Magical. Because one thing that is really, really evident as you watch the film is that there is some incredible level of trust. And some of the scenes, I mean, I made a few notes. There was moments where they just got you in the ticker, as my mother says, right? And they sort of lingered there with you. And I couldn't imagine, Stacie, you opened up your life for us to go through some moments that were very sensitive and felt,
I did.
Very real.
But I think that's important. What I appreciated and loved so much about Jen is her honesty, her realism, and just her forwardness. And that's the type of person that I am. So I felt from the get-go that it was a great mix. And that's why I decided that this is something I needed to do. It's honest, it's real, and it's what I live every day, and not just myself, but many of us around the world, and I feel without our story being told, we're not ever going to have a voice to be heard.
Yeah, and
that's why I felt it was important to do this.
Oh, and sorry, Stacie, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, I believe really strongly as a filmmaker in accountability, and really bringing your work back, not just in terms of the content, but also the way of making. I really believe strongly in the question of, as Faye Ginsburg from NYU says, the aesthetics of accountability, that there's a way to formally kind of incorporate a deep community sense, and even a sort of sense of co-authorship in the form. And what was, I think, wonderful about Stacie's and my collaboration is that we did get to be honest with each other. So I think from the get-go, Stacie, I was very open with you about what I was hoping to do, that I was interested in exploring how the refugee resettlement issue was causing a lot of tension in the town, and asked you how you felt about it. And, all throughout the filmmaking process, I think we were very open with each other about what it was also doing to us at making it. Yeah,
absolutely. But I have always, ever since the moment that I had met you, I have always felt that deep connection. And I'm just grateful for that today. And I'm glad that we did this film together. I would not have done it without you, that's for sure. Yes. And please understand that, it did take time to open up my home and my family to this. It's not something that just happened overnight. It's something that took time to build, and the end result, I think, shows in the documentary, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I think there was, what I was, to bounce off, Stacie, what you just commented on, I was also really impressed, Jennifer. You had clearly a wonderful working relationship with Stacie, but also a relationship with the town. I mean, you had coverage and close proximity, intimate moments with quite a few, not only people, but perspectives. There was, at one of the sources of the conflict, which we'll get to, there was multiple conflicts happening here, but there was clearly very differing views about the refugee families, and to be able to have very in-depth conversations with other families with very different perspectives. Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to getting to know the town itself?
Yeah, well, I think in some respects, like I said, I've always strived to embed myself and sort of absorb what I can of a community's sensibilities or values when I'm making a film there. But of course, in the case of Rutland, I had a unique relationship to the town because I did live there for part of my childhood and adolescence. And my mom still lives in a farming town right outside of Rutland. My dad passed away a few years ago when we buried him there. So it's, I've, even though I haven't lived there in about 35 years, it's still a place that's made me, and where my family lives, and where we have a lot of connections. So I think some of it was just having that familiarity with the town, and knowing like places that I filmed most of it myself because I wanted to actually have the direct connection with the camera to places that I cared about. And some of these are things that, if you live in Rutland, like Gill's Grinders, this great place that makes these amazing sandwiches, I made sure to get that in there because I just love the place and it means something, so I think part of being able to make this particular film was having that sense of connection to place. And then we also had a very important collaborator who couldn't join us tonight because he works for the Rutland Herald newspaper as a reporter and is reporting late tonight, but Jim Sabataso, who was the field producer and also operated second camera, also grew up in Rutland, still lives there. His brother and I went to elementary school together. And Jim operated a very small camera himself and shot a lot of the scenes, for example, with Chris Louris, because Jim knows Chris quite well. So there was a sense of intimacy, I think, that Jim, Stacie, and I all had with each other and with the town. And as you know, in a small community, everybody's connected. Right. So Stace and I figured out, I think a few times after we started talking, that my mom, who used to teach literacy and adult learning and all this stuff, like her workmate was a mentor of yours, right, Stace? And like, so everybody turns out, starts to know each other. And I think that's part of the fabric of the film too, is despite the fact that there is very deep conflict and it's not all resolved, there is some other way that people do have to live together. And that's part of what I wanted to capture in the film as well.
There is still that deep sense of
Yeah.
community.
Yes, yes.
I was going to add, actually, that's a perfect segue, because what really was ultimately very striking to me about the film is that it had the opportunity to almost be, it was at the apex of almost a trifecta of conflict.
Yes.
Right? So we have a number of situations happening, and I wondered at one point, I was like, is this going to stay grounded? And you both managed to keep the film grounded and not let it veer. It could have become untethered, because all of those situations were very nuanced and they were very heavy, and they were intense at times. How important was it to both of you, as these different peripheral situations are clearly having an impact on the town, on day-to-day operations, to stay true to an original goal? Did the goal shift and change a little bit, as we moved from A to B? I guess my question would be, could you speak to, wow, I had a plan, I came in, I thought there was a story here. Oh boy. For lack of a better phrase, we've got the severe immigration policies coming. We've got a potential refugee crisis on top of a situation already that I was interested in exploring to some degree in this town. Speaking to shifts and changes as the story progressed.
Well, I would say, in terms of what I originally envisioned, I was looking for Stacie, actually, from the very beginning, because I knew, first of all, from having lived in Rutland, it's a small town, but as you've, I think discover in the film, some of the class divides are very harsh. And I've always felt that that's terrible, and that it hurts people, incredible, wonderful people like Stacie, that there's a sense that even in a small town, there can be this kind of dividing line. And I was very aware of that as a kid, and feeling like that it just was wrong and painful. So I always wanted, actually, you remember, Stacie and I talked about that, one of the kids I met in second grade, right after we'd moved there from Los Angeles, who had this terrible experience at school that was entirely because the whole town looked down on his family, so I've been thinking about this, since then. And so when I knew that, okay, there was an opportunity to kind of have a little spark of a story through the refugee resettlement, I immediately thought I didn't want to have it get mired in a binary of left and right, or red and blue, or, whatever the political polarization was happening. So I was actually looking for somebody who who wasn't being listened to, and who wasn't already factoring into that landscape of representation that gets very narrow, especially when we talk about small towns in rural America. We've got such a terrible schematic, I think, really dismissive way of looking at these communities. That's terrible. And I think that we do that on, the progressive as well as the conservative sides. I just think there's a lot of reductionism. So anyway, I wanted to just really break that up. And I wanted to find someone like Stacie. So that was the core of the story. And despite the fact that, yes, a lot of stuff happened that we didn't anticipate, starting with the 2016 events, and what it transpired from there. In some ways, it was still the story I wanted to make.
I mean, it was, let's face it, it was an election year. There was an opiate crisis. There was the issue with the resettlement. And let's not even begin with the political aspect of it. And I just think that in a sense, it all came together. And it came together in a way that this is the life that I'm living. This is how I see it. And this is the perspective that I have. This is the struggle that I live. And the struggle is still real for me today. I mean, I work at the corner store, and I'm grateful because I'm still in my neighborhood and still have that sense of community. But, you know, when it comes to like our welfare system or our healthcare or things like that, like the struggle is real. I still live it every day of my life. You know, like, I'll be honest with you, I got my paycheck today. I have to make that choice. Do I pay my rent or do I pay my medical insurance because my husband's on 3 different heart medications? I mean, it's just such a struggle that I still live today. And part of the reason I did the documentary is because I might not own my own home. I might not be the 1%, you know, and I might not have all this money, but I still have a voice. I still deserve to be heard just like anyone else. And there are many more people out there like me that have something to say. We work our hinds end off to get where we are today, and we should be heard.
Yeah.
You know, our whole welfare system here in the state of Vermont, and I'm sure elsewhere in this country and the world, needs to be revamped, needs to be, you know, for the families that are working or for the families that need to get on their feet. And instead of being the life they live, have it be a tool in their toolbox that they utilize. Yeah. And I'm ranting and I'm sorry, but that's just, I feel like all these connections with the resettlement, you know, it being an election year, the political side of it, you know, all I am is a human being who works my hind end off, who struggles every day with a wonderful, amazing family. And I just want to be heard. Yeah. And I feel if I can be heard, changes that need to be made will be made.
I think, Joanne, you also had a question earlier. Did I dream that? No? Okay, I thought you had a question. What I was going to say, Stacie, and you made this great point as well, and I think this is something that the film also, everything came together, as you said. Stacie, your voice, I think, was particularly impactful because it is the voice of so many different people who do, I think, very much feel that they're not being heard, that this, you know, that these experiences, which are not always like grandiose and waving a flag and getting all the attention, but they are the experiences that so many people are having. And so I think that really, it resonated with me. I'm sure it resonated with a lot of people that have seen the film. One question I did have for both of you was, during this experience with one another and going through the larger experience of these things that were happening, right, as the film is being made, did you have a particularly impactful day with one another? Did something happen that stuck with you? I had my moments in the film, which I'll wait to share, but I was very curious. I think anytime you have a prolonged, important relationship with someone and something really kind of awesome comes out of it, you do go back in your memory to a day that stuck, good, bad, or the other. So I was wondering if you had a moment during the process.
The day we met in the park, I knew there that this was something I needed to be a part of. Yeah. That day right there.
And Ingrid, that is an amazing question, because it's just a really smart question, because I think Stacie and I both really think about the day we met and maybe some, you know, but then everything just kind of unfolded from there. I mean, I think I can think of days that I think the first time I came into your house, Stacie, after quite some time of us getting to know each other, to me was a very moving and important day. And actually the film kind of begins that way, where you take me into Tyler's room and say, hey, come look in Tyler's room. And we kind of see what unfolds as he
For
was having
sure.
that conflict with his teacher. That was really incredibly meaningful to me, that we built up enough of a relationship that you let me come in with the camera. So that was a day.
I
And
agree.
actually another day that I'll say too is actually the very beginning of the film is when we went to the demolition derby and I almost got killed trying to film you in the back of that monster truck.
She's exaggerating, I promise.
Yeah, I'm teasing. The centrifugal
She was
force there was a little more centrifugal force than I anticipated, but it was like we got to do some fun stuff, and that was really meaningful.
Yeah, I remember that scene very well, actually, and it looked like a very impactful experience if you haven't done it before. I haven't done it before.
Yeah.
So
That was my first time too.
oh, really? That's
Yeah.
hysterical.
We're in this together, I promise.
Well,
Yeah.
I saw the supportive wide angle of the truck just in case. Just in case, right? You have the one in the truck, and then we've got somebody on standby.
Oh my God.
So I see a note. I wanted to open this up to anyone who's also in here with us right now. If anyone has a question they'd like to ask before I go to some moments that I thought were particularly touching for me. Does anybody want to ask anything that's with us right now? Okay.
Wait, no. Wait.
Sorry. Sarah. Yes, Sarah.
I have a quick question. It's for Stacie. So I was just wondering, your voice just comes through in such a powerful way. I was wondering if there was ever a moment during filming that you felt like you were sharing too much, or that it was just like a little too much for people to grasp, or that you just felt like it was too near and dear to your heart that you didn't want to share with people. And like, if so, and then you did end up sharing it, how did you overcome that fear?
Well, the entire thing, honestly. But I knew the importance of it from the very beginning, and I knew that being real and honest and truthful was what this film needed, and was what needed to happen, and that's why I took it to heart in deciding to do the film. So from the very start.
Wow.
I was, always wondering, is it too much? But I think exactly what was shown needed to be shown, and I'll stick with that till the end. So yeah, there were days, but it was from the beginning. But I'm okay with that because, like I said, it's real, it's honest. Yeah, it may be too open, but that's okay. It is what it is. It's done. Here we are today, and we can move forward from this. And even if we touch one person, goal accomplished.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so powerful.
Thank you.
Sarah, that was a good question.
Very good.
Feel free to jump back in. I was going to say also, I think it's so important to see on screen in so many ways, right? Someone who is articulating or representing something that you are having a hard time with yourself, or that you don't see a lot. And that's, I think, another reason why this film is so important and is resonating, because this is a lot of things that we do. Again, we're not waving a flag about this stuff. We try to sometimes, in so many ways, this country just pretends that it's fine, and it's not. And this was a really wonderful, realistic look at the nuances of that. Before I get to moments that and Stacie, I just have something to tell you, and it's about the Golden Girls, and I'll wait, but I just, my whole heart when you said that, that you love them. I love them too. But Jennifer, we haven't talked yet about relationships in the editing room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in doc work particularly,
Yeah.
that very transparent, very communicative relationship. Can you speak a little bit to conversations about, are we getting in the timeline what I wanted in an honest way? Were there ever moments where you're like, this might be heading down somewhere and we might have to shift gears a little bit here? I'd love to know about that.
Well, I worked with an editor named Jen Bradwell, who she and I had cut a couple of shorts together previous to this film, so we knew we had a good relationship and a good chemistry. Not just because we're both named Jen, but just we have a kind of, I think, similar sensibility about trying to see as much of kind of the emotional subtext of the story unfold, in addition to, you know, plot points and exposition. And Jen and I agreed that what we would do is take about the 300 hours or so of material that we had and only cut the verite into big, long scenes without any exposition whatsoever or interview or any kind of connective tissue. And that took a really long time. But what we said is, we agreed to do this. It felt risky because, you know, you build a scene out, and if you have too much material in it, it can feel kind of flabby and, oh no, what's in here? But what that did let us do is identify every potential beat in the scene, as well as in all the ins and outs. And so we put together a first assembly. I think we cut 100 or 110 scenes that way. And part of that too was to just try to see if we could get out of the way in a certain sense and not force any of the story into, you know, cliche or tropes, but rather see how much kind of contradiction could remain, how much ambiguity could stay in the scenes too. So that's what we did at the beginning, and I think we had a really long assembly of something like 4 or 5 hours at the end of that. And then we, you can see I still have remnants of our storyboarding up behind me that I have been keeping for sentimental reasons. This is only a tiny portion of it, but you can see we color coded, so we had, you know, different colors for different folks in the film. And we started, you know, putting those assemblies together to try to make us a feeling of place. What we really struggled with was how to bring all the supporting characters in and how to make it clear who the different key people were, other than Stacie and Chris, who were kind of easy, you know, to signpost. And that really took a lot of iterations and a lot of mistakes, and a lot of, you know, rabbit holes. I wasn't in the room all the time. Jen wanted to have a little space to try stuff, and that worked for me. And we really trust each other too. And what's funny is Jen Dradwell and Stacie haven't met in person yet. You know, other than me, Jen may be one of the other people in this project that feels like she knows you so well and loves you, Stacie. So, I mean, I think there was that too, is that we made this with deep love. And you can tell that from everybody who ended up working on the film, from the composer, Emily Rice, to the sound designer, Alyssa Navarez, even Robert Arnold, who came in at the end to do the grading, just loves you, because it was such an honor to get to craft the story with you at the center of it.
And I think that that's something that I don't think that we talk about enough, is having a light, thoughtful touch and not getting in the way of something that was really great, and that it's just there and needs a degree of honesty. The sound is, the sound, the music, I thought it was all very super appropriately delicate and nuanced. We have a question from our viewers. The question is, Jennifer, what are you working on now?
Oh, well, I'm actually looking up at my other computer, where I'm cutting a short piece for a PBS digital series that I'm series producing about essential workers who are Latino. And we're doing 13 pieces, including one done in Chelsea, in Boston. So we're various filmmakers, we're all working together to make a series of shorts about essential workers. And I'm cutting a couple of pieces right now that I just shot about an extraordinary community effort in San Francisco, led by Latino activists who are getting COVID testing done for essential workers in our neighborhood, and partnering with scientists from UC San Francisco, to prove with data how deeply disparate the effects of COVID are on people. So that's what I'm doing right now, as we speak.
That's a lot. You're doing a lot. That sounds like a lot of work is happening. So I wanted to share with us, as we sort of kind of pull this together here, a couple moments that really just landed. You know, I was watching the film obviously one was the Golden Girls, Stacie, if you even knew. I was so terribly excited that you're also a fan. But one was the scene after the mayor switch happened, and the phone call was made to congratulate, and that just, there was something about that entire process where I thought that was a huge moment in the film, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember thinking, just being very, very involved at that point and not knowing, where we're going to take it. And then Stacie, there was a moment where you said, and I wrote it down, you said, a lot of us addicts are not broken. We're doing what we can. And it was just the way that you said it. And it almost made it, I don't know, it made me just feel like everything was okay somehow, or it would be okay. And it was just this very honest, soft, final sort of delivery. It was very, very sweet. So I'll go ahead, Stacie.
Yeah, because addiction doesn't just, affect us lower class, quote unquote. It affects, lawyers, it affects doctors, judges. I mean, the list goes on, and, I just feel that, it's important to realize, when you're walking down the street and you see someone, just giving a smile or a simple hello or a nod of the head can go a long way. And you could even save someone's life by doing that. I think it's important to bring life back to the simple things, and just realizing that, we're not alone. It affects many different diversities, walks of life and stuff. So yeah. It
was a very touching moment, I thought, as the viewer in particular. The last question that I had, and obviously we can jump in and chat about whatever we would like, is, what has the response been so far? Have you had a particularly engaging, touching moment with viewers as the film has been screened in different places?
Jen?
Well, I was going to mention, it's been, of course, we're doing everything virtually, so you could imagine if we were showing this in person, how wonderful it would be to be with Stacie and have her talk to folks directly, which was my dream. So I'm glad we're getting to do that here. When we premiered the film, we had the world premiere in Canada at Hot Docs. I got the most amazing email from a woman. I remember I sent it on to you, Stace. A woman who said that your life story resonated a lot with hers because she had grown up in similar circumstances. But she said she had distanced herself from that experience because she was able to, come into some money and kind of, change her life circumstances, and that she ran away from her life. And she talked about how the film made her reconnect to who she'd been and realized that she needed to kind of honor that experience that she'd been through herself. And it was an incredibly moving note to get from somebody who I think had, in some respects has had a lived experience that maybe has some resonance with yours, Stacie, but who also was able to kind of look back and
very much so.
And she kind of was self-critical about what she'd done since her life changed. It was really moving. And we've had other, emails and notes like that from folks. So I think we've had hopefully the impact that we want to have with the film. At least we're beginning to, feel it out. And obviously we want to do more and have the opportunity to have these conversations.
As an educational piece as well.
Yeah. And I just also, I guess I want to also say that, the subtext or even the obvious text of the film was about polarization and the ways that we're splitting ourselves up into these groups. And that's, even worse now than it was 4 years ago. And I think that we're losing something really important in the way that we're choosing sides. And that is the folks who maybe haven't yet picked a side or who are assumed to be on a side. And that was the thing that was, to be honest, bugged me the most about what we filmed, was to see in particular sometimes really wonderful folks who were in support of refugee resettlement, who weren't always extending the possibility that, for example, Stacie could become part of that movement. And that really bugged me, because I think that's a mistake. It's first of all, it's just unfair, it's wrong. And it's also like just kind of stupid when we think about trying to build broader coalitions. That if we're snobs, basically, to people who don't, live like us, that, we're committing sometimes in progressive circles, the same problem, the errors that are being committed elsewhere of dehumanizing other people. And I just, that's driving me bonkers.
I agree.
So that was a big reason to what we wanted to have come out of the film.
I think it's a super important film. I think that the all the shades of gray that you present, both of you in your work together, are incredibly impactful right now, and will be for some time. I mean, it was a really poignant, touching look, and I think you both did such a fabulous job. I'm going to open it up right now if anyone else in the chat with us has anything they'd like to ask, or Jennifer and Stacie, if you're like Ingrid, which Golden Girl is your favorite? I could tell you. So if anyone else has any questions that they want to ask, we can definitely, I'll hold the floor for them right now.
All right, I'm dying to know, Ingrid. I'm sorry, I'm dying to know which one.
It's got to be Dorothy. She's so angry about most things all the time, and I just feel a sense of compassion for her, and because I'm grumpy too sometimes, and so I really just appreciate her a lot.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, who's your favorite, Stacie?
I'm just gonna throw out there Sophia, because she's very
Sophia,
for sure,
and I really like her. We have a lot in common.
I know it is hard to choose sometimes. Don't you feel like all of them simultaneously? Yeah. I've derailed us. I'm sorry.
I'm totally team Sophia, because my grandmother was Sicilian, and she was like, Sophia is practically the embodiment of my grandmother, except my grandmother also told flatulent jokes. Like my grandmother just would go there.
She sounds great.
But yeah, Sophia, yeah, right?
Sounds great.
Absolutely.
I'll send you all. There's a funny Instagram today. I follow all the Golden Girls Instagram.
Nice.
But Sarah, you had a humdinger before. Any final questions?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to go back to the editing room for docs. I always find that like the most interesting place for documentaries. And for Jen, I was wondering, like, was there anything like behind your wall there that you wish could have made the film, but like wasn't, that like didn't make the final cut? I'm so curious.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. That's a great question. There's a ton, of course, because we shot so many scenes. There's one thing that we did that we completely cut out of the film, and that is we actually went to Jordan with a radio reporter from the town, and my dear friend Mustafa, who also had come to Rutland to film at one point with me. Mustafa and Jim and I went to Amman with the local radio reporter from Vermont Public Radio, and we happened to be in the airport at Logan Airport the day that the Muslim ban started going into effect, and we had already gone through security, and all of a sudden we're getting all these texts saying, holy F, you guys, should you even be getting on this plane? We went, we did the trip. It turned out everything we planned to film got shut down because we were going to film with people who were about to come to the US and be approved to come to the US. And we were kind of following the radio reporter to see how she would frame these stories. It all, got thrown away because of that, what happened. What we did film, which was really moving, were a couple of days on a farm with some Syrian families who'd been displaced from their farms, and they were working for a part. And right, you saw it, Stacie. It was beautiful material, and the radio reporter ended up really connecting their lives and their love for the land with her audiences back in Rutland. And we very reluctantly cut it out of the film because it just felt like too much of a detour.
Mhm.
But we'll put it up with, extra features. So that was one that hurt. And also, I should mention, Stacie moved into a really wonderful new house.
Yes.
Right down the street from her place that you saw in the film. And we filmed it, and we decided not to put it in the film because we wanted to leave the film a little bit more open-ended.
Mhm.
And it just, it was another thing that went on, unfortunately, by the wayside. But I just want everyone to know you ended up really making some wonderful changes toward the end of our filming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations
And
to the
thank
both
you,
of you.
Jen. I think that's important to point out. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously there's so much, like, as Stacie said, she's working now at the local convenience store. And I think you're also working as the unofficial counselor for probably half the neighborhood in that role.
Police officer, babysitter,
Uh-huh.
cashier,
Yeah. So
I'm
there-
grateful.
yeah, so a lot of things like that we just couldn't, of course,
Yeah.
cram in. And I should mention one other thing, and I apologize that I'm kind of going on. It was reported in the Boston Globe, and this was a sad thing, but Chris Louris, the mayor of the town, suffered a family tragedy last fall, where his son and his nephew were killed in a shooting incident. And it really had to do with, some of the same things that Rutland as a community and so many communities are struggling with about issues of
The mental health and
Yeah.
opiate crisis.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just mentioned that because I want to acknowledge that there's also still been a lot of pain in the community, but also I think a spirit where the community has stayed together, and people across the aisle from each other ideologically have come together in support.
Yes.
So life continues in all its
Absolutely.
complications. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest thing that's so interesting about documentaries is that like the story continues after like the
Yeah.
movie finishes.
Mm.
And then there's like a whole other chapter book even, especially in your case when you said like you have 4 or 5 hours of filming down and then you cut it down to 90 minutes. That's an accomplishment, and then so many other stories that we didn't get to experience through the final cut. But I'm so glad I got to ask that question.
Me too, Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah, you're killing it. You're killing it. Feel free to ask another one.
Yeah. And it's a dilemma, all filmmakers of course know that it hurts when you have to do that, but
and it's just sitting in your drive, like waiting to be seen.
yeah, especially that Jordan trip that we took. It could be a whole other film. And remember, we came back and shared a lot of it with we showed Stacie some of what we experienced, and it was a really deep and moving experience too, and also terrible because some of the people who we talked to, their situations were so dire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And I think with that trip, I think it would have pointed out that it doesn't matter where you go in the world, that at the end of the day, situations may be different, but it's still similar in the end,
Yep.
And I think that's important to remind
absolutely.
ourselves.
Yeah, well, like you said before, Stacie, like you're human, and so is everyone else in the world.
Right.
That's super important.
Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, I think that we're pretty close to kickoff here. That was a really lovely discussion, and this was wonderful. The film was wonderful, super important for obviously a number of reasons that we talked about today, as well as stuff that we didn't even scratch the surface of. But I'm really excited for both of your success. I'm so glad I got to be here. So I want to thank everybody at Boston Women's Film Festival for letting me come in and chat with you, and Sarah for these questions. Man, where are you coming from? Thank you,
Good teacher.
Joey.
She had a good teacher.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, I accept. But no, it was so lovely, and I wish you all a bunch of successes. I'm sure the rest of us do, and feel super privileged to be able to watch the film. Stacie, thank you.
Thank you.
your honesty and sharing your voice, which
Thank you.
resonating very strongly with a lot of people. So I think I'll land the plane here. And I want to say thank you so much. Joanne, did you have any remarks that you wanted to make? No? All right. Thank you, everybody that tuned in as well. Thank you for your questions and your time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the films at the Boston Women's Film Festival. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.